Yo, what up? How's it going? And welcome back for another video. Today's video, we're going to be doing a patch notes rundown for 10.7 TFT. So the purpose of this video is going to be to, talk about the highlights of the patch, go a little bit deeper into the numbers, stuff like that. And then at the end of the video, we'll talk about some comps that I think might be good or some things you might want to try on the first couple days of this patch and all that good stuff. If you're unfamiliar with me, I've been making patch notes rundowns for League of Legends for over a year now. But now just shifting a little bit more to doing TFT stuff, as it's just kind of the game I'm focusing on right now. So I'm no stranger to doing patch notes rundowns if you're unfamiliar with me. Currently I'm hard stuck D1 right now, but we're going to be climbing pretty soon. So yeah, I always love doing these types of things. So let's just get right into it. Okay, so the patch highlights, it has, here are the buffs right here. We're going to go into them in just a second, so we're not going to talk about them right here. And then the nerfs over to here. I think Mystic is weird. It probably should just be an adjust because there's a buff to 2 Mystic. But anyways, we're going to dive a little bit deeper into this, but a lot of the weaker things being buffed right here, like Sniper, Blademaster, Chrono, and Sorcs. I don't actually believe there's a trait change for Sorcs on here, but we're going to dive into that. And then finally, we're going to be nerfing all of the legendary units, which is amazing because the game is really unfun to push 8 at 4-3 and have to gamble with everybody else. It's a really unfun way to play the game. And I'm really happy that legendaries are getting nerfed, especially Gangplank is getting hit pretty heavily with the nerf bat. Okay, so this is some system changes. So if you're not really familiar with like looking at patch notes like really deeply and you don't play a lot on PvE, you may have noticed like a lot of the carousels are really weird. I mean, I find a lot in a lot of my games, everybody's like question mark pinging a bunch at the beginning. They think it's like the craziest thing in the world, but if you play enough TFT, then you should be used to a lot of these things. But here's some of the things. It is here and with pomp and circumstance as a reminder of all of your TFT games have a chance to start with one of the following effects, if not, or no effect at all. So this is like some of the weirder things, like you start a carousel with 4 cost units on the first carousel. Everyone gets 2 free copies of Nico's Help. I've never noticed this one. Medium legends, little legends are larger and you have plus 25 starting health. That may be new or was just on PvE. I get confused a lot of times because I play a lot on PvE, but this is stuff I've been used to, except for this bottom one. Maybe I just haven't noticed, but this will all be on live if it wasn't already. So just be looking out for that. I do remember the 2 Nico's Help being on live, I believe. But anyways, so you can start a first carousel with a 4 cost unit. I haven't seen that on live very much, or not at all maybe. I play a lot on PvE, so it gets confusing. But be looking out for that. This is now on live. So yeah, this will happen in randomly in your games, and it'll happen for everybody. So just be looking out for that. Okay, shop level 8 drop rate. So essentially what's changed right here is they're just moving 1% from legendary over to 1 cost units. So everybody pushing for 8 at 4-3 and then gambling for the legendaries to build their entire composition around is slightly being nerfed. I don't think it's that substantial, but the actual legendaries themselves are getting nerfed as well, which will maybe change the meta of pushing 8 at 4-3 to have to compete for, MF, Gangplank, and Aurelion Sol and Ekko, which are the foundations of all the meta compositions right now, except for snipers. And Sorcs, but Sorc isn't a meta composition. So that's a little bit of nerf to that strategy, and as well as nerf to legendaries, I think will really, really, really change the meta on like having to push for 8 and building your entire win condition around getting a legendary will change with a lot of compositions. Obviously with like rebels, if you're still wanting to run rebels on this patch, then that'll still be a very viable strategy. But I do think you might not have to do that every game because there's not going to be 4 players competing for rebels, or at least there shouldn't be in every lobby like there is right now. Okay, the rules for which items stay and which bounce off combining champions. Now prioritize champs on the board rather than the ones you get from carousel. So if you already have 3 completed items on a champion and you get a item on the champion from carousel and it auto combines onto your champion, it'll knock off the one you got from the carousel, not one of the items you already had on. I hadn't noticed, this is very niche, you wouldn't have noticed it if it hadn't happened to you, but this has happened to me before and I was like, what is happening? Because I had like, I don't know what items, but I had a core item on one of my champions. It auto combined into a 3-star and then it knocked off the core item for that champion that I already had on them and added an item that I didn't want because I thought it would just knock off the item I didn't want because I didn't have it combined on my champion yet. But it took off one of the core items and I lost the game based off of that. because I had a 3-star that I lost a core item component, and I thought it was just going to combine and take off the item that I got from Carousel, which is what it will do now. If you have items fully stacked on a champion, and if it combines, then now the item you got from the Carousel will be the one that gets knocked off, which should happen. That should be the intended purpose. So I'm really happy that's fixed, because I was really awful for the 1% of the time that would happen to you. It was really awful. Okay, the odds of seeing a special carousel has now been reduced. So special carousels, when you get a full item and stuff like that, or all spats, or all the same item. So the likelihood of that has been reduced slightly, which I guess that's nice. It's not really that fun having the special carousels all the time. Remove the additional 5 seconds per planning phase. I didn't actually notice this, but yeah, we had 5 extra seconds. I did kind of notice the rounds felt kind of long, but so it's removed 5 seconds that it taken away because everybody's a little bit more used to the current set now. Cool. So let's talk about trait bonuses. Now we're into the really interesting stuff. Blademaster is getting changed. So 5% bonus on chance to activate at 6 Blademasters. I think this is a really useless change because running 6 Blademasters is pretty XD, and I think it still will be. Maybe I'll change my opinion after the first couple days, but I don't think 6 Blademasters are very good. Maybe a change to the 3 Blademaster would have been better to actually put something into meta. But I don't think this actually changes it to where there's a 6 Blademaster meta. I could be wrong, but I really don't think that. Brawler health is being reduced by 50 at max health. This is important because I think blaster brawlers are actually going to be really strong in this patch. I think a lot of people are hyper focusing on the snipers, but we'll talk more about that later. But this is actually pretty nice because I do think brawlers are going to be crazy OP if we do actually get into a meta that is highly physical damage based. Because the downside of picking brawlers as your front line and having, blasters or infiltrators or something like that, it's very difficult to put mystics into that comp. So I think this nerf is actually needed. You may be looking at this and think, well, most of my games didn't really have 4 brawlers, but now because most of your games were running rebels, and if you ran 4 brawlers and no mystics, you get one shot by Gangplank and MF. But now that that's getting nerfed, brawlers probably are going to go a little bit up in priority, I would suspect. Cool. Chrono attack speed. This is a little bit nice. So it's going up to 75% at 6 Chrono. I've been playing with this a little bit. It feels interesting. I can see a world where you run 6 Chronos and then go to 8 and run like a Kayle carry composition with Blademaster, just with the 3 Blademaster. I think 3 Blademaster is fine. And do like a weird static Shiv build where you're constantly proccing it on Kayle. I could see a world in which that happens. So that'll be really interesting, something that you might want to try out, but we'll talk more about it at the end. Darkstar is getting reworked. So previously when a champion died on Darkstar, you'd give 50% and then scale up to 80% bonus damage to an ally that is nearest to you. And that effect could stack. Now what will happen is all other allied champions will gain 25 either attack damage or spell power, depending on what they prioritize. Or 20, no, it gives them both actually. It's not adaptive. It gives them 25 attack damage and spell power. At 6, it'll give 35. So what this actually means is for a champion like Jhin, this is a huge buff for Jhin. Because previously, Jhin is not very close to the other units that will be dying, so he doesn't actually get the Darkstar bonus until very late into the fight usually, unless like his Karma gets assassinated or something like that, unless there's infiltrators. But now, whenever a unit dies, he's going to instantly get 35 attack damage. So when the whole front line dies, he's immediately going to get 4 times 35 added to him, which is going to be insane. So Jhin is actually going to be very strong in this patch, and I think that's what everybody's really looking at. So this is a huge buff to Jhin because he's actually getting the damage when his front line dies, where previously he really wouldn't because he's not very close to his front line. And his front line is usually the units that die first in most of the combat situations. So be looking out for that. I think that's what everybody's really expecting is Darkstar to be strong. But we'll talk more about that at the end of the video. Okay, Mana Reaver has been reworked. So basically, Mana Reaver is exactly the same as everybody is used to. Because nobody ran 4 Mana Reavers. So just 4 Mana Reavers been taken away. And now the bonus is just the 2 Mana Reavers. So Mana Reavers attacks increase the mana cost of their target spell by 40%. Is it all attacks? I guess it's all attacks, which is really, really awesome because nobody ran 4 Mana Reaver. Mana Reaver attacks increase the mana of their costs. Okay, yeah, it's just basically the 4-piece bonus is now on to 2. So that might do some interesting things, especially when you run like, you could get into that situation like I talked about before. You get to 8, you're running 6 Chrono and then Blademaster. You could have Irelia and Thresh in your composition with maybe a Kayle carry with Irelia items as well, and you're just constantly proccing Mana Reaver with your Thresh and your Irelia. So that may be a really interesting thing to be looking out for, play around with. A lot of this stuff is a little bit speculative because if you play a lot of TFT, you just kind of know some things can be meta, but they're not meta until it's being played enough, like, you know, protectors and shit like that. You know, it's not meta until enough people are playing it, and then it's meta, which is an interesting thing, because when something is played enough, then a counter strategy should arise from that. But if that's not being played, then the counter strategy isn't valuable. So it's a very interesting thing. So Mystic's Magic Resist has been buffed at 2 and then nerfed at 4. This is a direct nerf to protectors, to running the hyper roll protector strategy where your Xin Zhao is unkillable, because Xin Zhao is getting a little bit of an adjust where he has more damage now. So it's kind of taking it down to where he's not as unkillable, because his cast time is going to be a little bit slower because he's not going to get mana as quick enough. But that's going to be a change later in the patch. And then also his magic resistance is going to be down. So this is pretty meaningful for running the 4 protector 4 Mystic, but it's actually a nice little buff, just a small buff to just slotting in Mystic trait whenever it's valuable, which I think is really, really important. I think that's really important. I think a lot of games should be decided by, at the end of the game, changing your composition based on the like 1 or 2 other players that are alive. And this little small buff to Mystic just makes that feel a little bit nicer when you're like, you big brain it and you're like, oh, I'm running 4 Vanguard, 4 Blaster, something like that, and my opponent's main damage source is magic damage. Maybe it would be a good idea to take out 2 of my Vanguards and put in 2 Mystic to keep my carries alive longer, and I don't really need the 4 Vanguard anymore. Smaller buffs to 2 unit synergies really buffs, like, in my opinion, really buffs like actually thinking about what's going on in the game rather than just running a composition off of like a spreadsheet that you saw, like, you know, you looked like St. Vicious comps and you're just going to run that every game. I think small buffs to small synergies really makes understanding nuance in the game more important, and I really like when small synergies are buffed like Mystic. I think that's very cool, and the 4-1 being nerfed a little bit. Okay, sniper bonus is going to go up 3%. It's pretty substantial nerf, especially since Jhin is already getting nerfed indirectly from Darkstar. So that's pretty insane. And Chrono getting buffed as well for, you know, champions like Caitlyn, if you're going to run Caitlyn and Jhin and Ashe, you know, in like a Chrono comp. So that's pretty cool. And Caitlyn's getting a lot of buffs as well. So Caitlyn's spellcast time is being reduced. I'm so happy for this because Caitlyn trolls so many games by channeling her ultimate when she's 1 auto away from killing somebody. It'll now lessen the amount of time that she has to channel, as well as she will resume attacking a little bit quicker after she fires her bullet. Not exactly sure how quicker because it doesn't show right here, which is nice. I mean, Caitlyn still won't be like a carry of a composition, but just a more valuable 1-cost unit that you can actually build your early game around a little bit easier. I'm really happy with the really happy with the buff. And you can get into some situations where you're at level 5 and you find an Ashe early, you're running 4 Chrono with an Ashe. So you can get in some cool situations where you can have some like really win streaky Chrono comps in the early game, which typically Chrono is very good in the mid game. So this is pretty interesting right there. Xayah attack speed's getting buffed. She's one of the worst units in the game, so I'm happy about that. So just a small little buff. Ziggs total mana is going up. Ziggs is like by far the best 1-cost unit in the game, especially with Rebels being meta. In my opinion, it's the best 1-cost unit in the game. You just stack Seraphs, Morellos, and he's just constantly one-shotting people. So I would imagine this 5 extra mana right here will make it to where Ziggs has to at least auto an additional time, I think is why the 5 mana is added there. So I would have to imagine that is the purpose of this nerf right here, is to make it to where it's not just Holt auto. Maybe there might be an additional auto into that sequence. But with Rebels getting nerfed anyways, I think Ziggs is indirectly getting nerfed on his own anyways. So I'm a big fan of that. Zoe is getting her base or her maximum mana buffed by reducing it so that she is more likely to ult. So she'll ult a little bit slower in the fight. So, or no, it's the same. It's 30 mana difference. So it's going to be the same. She'll just ult more frequently. And her spell damage is going up at 3-star. If you're 3-star in Zoe, you are trolling. So Zoe is, in my opinion, the worst unit in the entire game. It's nice that she's getting a little bit of buffs right here, getting a little bit of love. But if you're item stacking a 3-star Zoe, I don't know what you're doing with your life. But it is a little nice buff. She'll ult a little bit more consistently in fights. So that's going to be cool. And there might be some Sorc strategies that you can try out. So that's a Sorc buff right there. Darius's health is going up. That's pretty cool. He's kind of a weird unit. I still think item stacking Darius is probably not a good strategy, but I could be wrong. Pirates could be good on this patch if everybody ends up running snipers and you get a 4 Vanguard pirate comp and item stack a Darius might be a strategy, but typically item stacking a Darius is kind of like it's kind of like a noob thing to do. Like you're like, oh, if I put a lot of stuff on this, you win a lot of mid game fights, but then you lose to literally everybody in the late game because they have a Gangplank that one shots you and they have real compositions. But the nice little buff right here. There might be a meta in which pirates are not just a high roll composition because the vanguards will be really valuable just having them, because if everybody's running snipers, vanguards are going to be very, very powerful. Cool. Jhin Zhao, his mana is going up, so ult a little bit less consistently. So this is like making him a lot less tankier because this is an additional auto attack that he'll have to do before he can ult, because you just stack tank items on him. You don't stack mana gaining items on him. So he'll ult a little bit less consistently, and so it'll be easier to kill him when he sits there and tries to kill 6 of your units 1v6. So it'll make it a little bit less consistent for Jhin Zhao to be able to do that. His damage is going up as a compensation buff, and a lot of people might look at that and be like, Jhin Zhao's getting buffed, what? But since he's going to ult less, then he does need a damage compensation, because the big issue with Jhin Zhao is not him killing you, it's him living too long. So I'm fine with his spell damage getting buffed. That's fine with me, because his survivability is getting nerfed, which is the issue with Jhin Zhao. And the other part of survivability for Mystic being nerfed is being nerfed as well. So I don't have a problem with this at all. Okay, Ezreal is getting nerfed. Ezreal is one of the best units. He's my favorite unit in the entire game. So, I'm sad that he's not as good anymore. But he does need to be nerfed because he's insane. So his first ult will go off less consistently because he starts out with less mana, and the maximum mana is larger. So he'll ult a little bit less consistently, and to get his first ult off, and additionally his second ult as well will be slightly reduced. Spell damage is going down at rank 1 and 2 and 3, which is pretty good because Ezreal you can use a lot of times in a lot of compositions as an item holder for like MF or something like that, and you can stack AP items on him, and it's actually insane once you get to 2-star and you have like Merlinomicon Death Cap, something like that. It actually does like an insane amount of damage. So him getting nerfed right here is important, as well as Chronos is getting buffed. So if Chronos end up becoming a meta composition, it would be terrifying if Ezreal was still what he is currently in, and you could item stack him rather than something like a Caitlyn, Ashe, Jhin, or running like Blademaster variation of that comp. So it is good that he's being nerfed right here. Kassadin's total mana is going down, so this is opening the door to maybe running the idea of running a mana reaver with Kassadin and stacking maybe like mana and tank items on him, which would be really, 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 really interesting. I've always looked at Kassadin like, man, this champion is so close to being OP. I don't know if that makes him OP or anything like that, but I'm very, very, very interested on what this actually means, because Kassadin's kit is so insane that when you look at it, you want to think that it'll be OP to item stack it, but when you actually do it, it doesn't feel that way. So it's nice him getting a little bit of a buff right here, and Mana Reaver getting changed might create a situation where he's meta. I'm really unsure about Kassadin and Mana Reaver at the moment, but I'm very, very, very interested in it. So be looking out for that. Shaka spell damage is getting nerfed at max rank, so this is his critical strike damage that he's going to automatically do is getting reduced, which is interesting. Honestly, some games feel so unplayable whenever you have the enemy Shaco has perfect items and stuff like this. So it's interesting. There's certain situations where Shaco is just crazy overpowered. It's interesting he gets nerfed simultaneously when Shaco is pretty good against snipers, when snipers are getting buffed. So I don't know how I feel about this. So it'll be interesting. I think this might be a direct buff or indirect buff to Sorcs, which that sounds kind of troll when I say it out loud, but because the front line you typically run with Shaco that is the best is mechs, and if you're running Sorcs, then they're going to contest you for mechs a lot of the time. And if less players are running infiltrator comps because Shaco is getting nerfed, they just see this nerf and they're like, oh, I don't want to run Shaco anymore, which may be enough to not want to run Shaco. So it's like kind of an indirect buff to Sorcs because less people are going to want to play Shaco comps, and Shaco comps are going to already be contested if you run around the Dark Star variation, which isn't very good. That's already going to be contested because people want to run Jhin, and him just being nerfed just might just make it where like, I don't think I want to run infiltrators, which might open up the door to being able to 3-star your mechs for a Sorc comp, which is really interesting. So be looking out for that. Okay, Soraka is getting a buff by taking down her mana, her maximum mana, and also upping her healing by 50 at rank 1 and 2, which is pretty good because I really don't feel Soraka in games sometimes. Like you might have a Soraka in your comp and you just don't feel it. So I'm happy with this buff. She's going to ult a little bit earlier on in the fight, and her ult is going to feel a little bit more. So I'm actually really excited for that buff. And it also helps like a Star Guardian comp if you want to run a Mystic in your Star Guardian. So a little bit indirect buffs to Star Guardian and Sorcs going on here. And then a direct buff to Vel'Koz. His total mana is being reduced, so it's more likely he's going to get his ult off early on in the fight and get an additional ult off if you're running things like Seraphs and stuff like that. Vel'Koz still has a lot of UI issues, or AI issues, not UI, AI issues in 1v1 situations where he just ults like the side of the map that maybe will be addressed eventually, but I don't know. But Vel'Koz getting buffed right here, another direct buff to Sorcs. Wukong health going up to 100. Wukong is like the saddest war cost unit in the game. You never even want to finish him because like sometimes he doesn't even ult when you have him 2-star and he costs so much money. Like he's the most miserable thing in the world. But the buffs to Chrono and also the buffs to people wanting to run snipers and stuff like that may make 4 Vanguard much more appealing. And I could see a world in which Wukong is a very powerful unit based off of what other people are playing, because Vanguards are going to be decent against sniper compositions and physical damage heavy compositions, which would make Wukong, he's the highest cost Vanguard, which would make him stronger, and they buffed him directly. As well as if you want to run a Chrono composition, then Wukong as a frontliner is going to be a little bit more beefier when typically Chrono compositions don't have a lot of tank synergies involved in them. So make them a little bit weak on the front line. And so if your front line lives longer, then you'll get more Chrono bonuses. So this is a direct buff to Chrono and to Vanguard, and obviously to Wukong. So it's pretty nice. Aurelion Sol, so all the 5-cost units are getting nerfed, which is awesome. So Aurelion Sol, his damage is getting nerfed, so that's a direct nerf to Rebels, obviously. And his target selection is now random. It used to be weighted by random favoring nearby enemy, which I think that's kind of irrelevant. But okay. But the damage is getting nerfed by 20, and then at rank 2, 25, which is pretty impactful because he constantly ults. You know, it looks like a little bit, but he's constantly hitting people with damage. So that's actually a huge nerf when you look at it and thinking about like whenever he ults, he's going to hit like four people, you know. So that's going to be reduced quite a bit. It's more than 20. It's multiplical to the amount of people he's hitting. So just think about it that way. Ekko spell damage is getting nerfed a little bit. I don't know if Ekko really needs to be nerfed, but with things like Rebels going away and people wanting to try out snipers and people wanting to try out all this stuff, you notice like Cybernetics really haven't been changed. Cybernetics is, you know, the second best comp in the game probably at the current moment. It's pretty consistent. And with Mana Reaver getting buffed and stuff like that. So I really think Cybernetics are still really good. And one of the things with Cybernetics is if the carry of Cybernetics is Irelia. You want to get perfect items on Irelia. But sometimes you get into a situation where someone's contesting you for them, or you're just not hitting it. It's unlikely you're going to 3-star. You don't have enough money. And you can just 2-star Ekko and stack some items on him, and you can actually win the game that way. I've won plenty of games that way. I love to run Cybernetics. I think it's a really consistent way to play the game. That small nerf to him does make sense when you look at it through that lens. If you just think about Ekko as a whole, you're like, Ekko is like kind of a strong unit, but its infiltrators got kind of nerfed, and I don't know. But then when you look at it through the lens of the meta composition is getting nerfed, but Cybernetics really isn't, and then Lucian's getting some changes that'll help him. So you think about it that way, and you're like, oh, okay, that makes sense that he gets nerfed, because sometimes Ekko ends up becoming the carry of the cybernetic composition. And he's not that contested of a unit. Anyways, Gangplank starting mana is getting nerfed basically by 50, because his base mana is getting nerfed by 25, and then his maximum mana is getting nerfed by 25. Or wait, never mind. Just his max mana. I'm an idiot. It's going up 25. So it's going to be still 100. So he'll still ult. His starting mana is going to be essentially the same. but it's less likely he's going to ult twice in a fight, is essentially what this is doing. So like double stacking Seraphs on him. It's less likely he's going to get a second ult off, as well as his damage is getting annihilated. Minus 200, minus 250, and then at rank 3, which you never get a rank 3. Gangplank, I've never seen one in my life, but I'm sure it's happened, stays the same. So that is a huge nerf, because Gangplank is so troll right now where you'll just be playing a game and you hit a Gangplank and you're like, I guess Gangplank's my carry now. Like you'll have like a whole game plan the whole time, but you just see 2 Gangplanks in your hand and you get a 2-star Gangplank and okay, I'm gonna sell my whole composition and put items on this guy, and I guess my comp is just Gangplank. Which is like really unhealthy for the game, I think. So I'm really happy this is getting changed. So it's less likely you're just going to throw Gangplank into your comp. You're going to actually fit him in when it makes sense. Like if you have a demolitionist buff, like you're running mechs or something like that, or you have, or you're running like vanguards and you're getting a pirate composition going late game. Like it makes more sense that he adds on to compositions rather than being the focal point when he doesn't really have any synergies that should make him the focal point of a comp, other than, you know, if you have like a demolitionist thing going on or you have pirates or something like that. So he should only be the focal point of compositions, and it makes sense now. Hopefully, I think that's what the change is identifying, and hopefully that is making it that way. Lulu attack speed is getting nerfed a little bit, which is kind of irrelevant. Sojin being our best item does make that slightly relevant, but Lulu is still going to be strong. Mystics are 2 Mystic is strong, so Lulu is just a good unit, and I don't think she really need to be changed that much. Misfortune's damage or mana is basically just like Gangplank's. It's going to be the same, basically the same at starting, but it's less likely she's going to be able to ult twice, and her spell damage is reduced by 10%. At both of the ranks that matter. So just a small nerf to MF. I think Gangplank was the bigger problem rather than MF, but I'm happy with a small MF nerf, because people just throw, like Gangplank will just throw in MF with no synergies and no game plan. I think Gangplank was the bigger offender, so I'm happy with just a small nerf to MF. That's fine with me. Rollnomicon and red buff, probably the best items ever for an infinite amount of time. Getting nerfed by 3%, which does matter, but in terms of like identifying whether you want to build it or not is kind of negligible. Like these items are still amazing. They still give a healing debuff. They still deal this insane amount of damage. Compositions that want to build them, like Sorcs and blasters and stuff like that, red buff is still going to be one of the core items, so don't shy away from that. Static Shiv getting buffed is awesome, especially for early game. As I said with Chronos, I could see a world where you like double Static Shiv Caitlyn in the early game to win streak, and then you put a Static Shiv, you put those on Kayle in the late game, run a Blademaster comp. I could see worlds where like Static Shiv is a really OP item, especially for win streaking with the buffs that Caitlyn's got. I could see a world where actually grabbing bow is important. Because nobody grabs bows. I could see a world and where building for Static Shiv is a good plan, you know, for win streaking and shit like that, which I kind of like as an item. Okay, Warmog is getting buffed a little bit closer to how it was on preseason, so just a 1% buff. It's going to be pretty nice. You put it on like something like a Wukong, something like that. Cool, miscellaneous changes. So Ekko, Irelia, Lucian, it says Ekko twice. And Zhizhao will now trigger effects of Static Shiv, Winsu's Rageblade, and Runaan's Hurricane during their spell. Yeah, I thought that was bullshit. I didn't notice that Lucian wasn't proccing Static Shiv, and it was pissing me off. I don't know why it didn't. His ult is literally a double tap. That's like the point of Lucian, is that's his passive, like on Summoner's Rift. It's to double tap people. So it kind of pissed me off that he wasn't getting these effects. As well as Ekko, I was noticing his attack speed wasn't going up. Sometimes I put a Rage Blade on him as I was interested in what that effect would do. So I'm really, really, really happy these changes are happening, because I think it should be a core part of Lucian's gameplay that double tap triggers on hit effects. So that is doing that. And Ekko, it says triggers on fit effects, but it doesn't trigger the effect of Static Shiv, Rageblade, and Runaan's, which was super, super troll, and I hated it. So I'm glad that it's doing that. Those are the biggest offenders I had with Lucian and Ekko that I got really mad about. Champions now celebrate, so now your champions dance now. Graves got a really ugly splash art, so there we go. Hodge no longer healing scales with AP. I didn't know it did. Rebel Shield no longer scales with AP, similar to like when people were running Locket stacking, so it doesn't do that. Lucian's Relentless Pursuit, this is actually important, now properly counts as an attack for the purpose of the blaster trait. That's really cool, and I don't know why I didn't before. Because it's literally just, he auto attacks twice is his ultimate. It's a double tap. So that's really cool that that's fixed. fix an issue with where Miss Fortune would sometimes not turn during bullet time if there were no enemies being hit by her cone. Yeah, I would notice that sometimes she wouldn't turn, and then sometimes she would. So I'm glad that happened. Soul now works properly after GA triggers. Okay. Clarified Shaco's spell tooltip. The ability causes a critical hit on the top of the spell's bonus range, of course. These are just tooltips. Hextech Gunblade now correctly heals when dealing damage against shields. Okay, I didn't know it did not do that. Space Rockets no longer generate gold from hitting Fiora when she's parried. I did not know that happened either. That's probably good that that's fixed, and mobile stuff for changes right here. So looking at the overview for this, snipers are obviously going to be good. And people are going to play them a lot. Whether that becomes the meta, I think will take some time to see. But what I think is going to be interesting is people playing some of the older compositions. Notice Blaster Brawlers didn't really get nerfed. I mean, your Brawlers lost 50 health on each one, which is a total of 200 health, right? And Red Buff got nerfed by 3%, which is somewhat negligible. I mean, it does matter, but it's somewhat negligible. The main point of that item is the healing debuff and the little bit and the damage, right? But the healing debuff is a large part of that. But one of the big changes with that is if snipers ends up actually truly becoming like a meta comp, and I think for the first week it will be meta. Whether or not it actually is the strongest thing you can have, people will be playing it, so it will be meta. People will be playing it. And one thing that's cool about sniper compositions is that most of their damage is physical damage, or critical strike damage, right? Most of the damage that they deal is physical damage. Obviously, like Caitlyn and Ashe, if you want to go that route, they do deal a lot of magic damage, but most of the comps are going to be centered around Jhin. And even Caitlyn and Ashe, stuff like that, they deal a ton of physical damage, is a large portion of what their damage output is, even though they deal magic damage. Something that's really cool about that is one of the downfalls of running Blaster Brawlers in the previous meta is that it's really hard to fit in Mystic. And you'd have to make some tough decisions whether it's worth running Mystic. But if the strongest players in the lobby are competing for snipers and for physical damage comps, if you're in like blademasters, stuff like that, people are competing for Chrono, blademasters, stuff like that, then Blaster Brawlers, boy, we got all the HP, we got all that damage from our blasters. It didn't get changed that much. And the downside of running Blaster Brawlers was you couldn't get magic resist built into your comp naturally. You would have to get it from items and stuff like that. And so with that taken away, with Rebels and Aurelion Sol and Gangplank not one-shotting your composition, then it opens the door to comps that were already strong just being that much stronger. Stuff like Cybernetics, stuff like Blaster Brawlers, I think are going to be really strong, and people probably aren't paying enough attention to it. Other comps that could be strong on this patch, I think maybe Pirates. This is with the condition of a lot of people playing snipers, which 100% people are going to be playing snipers the first week. So this will be true at least the first week. And if snipers become meta, then this will remain true. Running 4 Vanguard comps and like running early game Pirates are going to be strong. Running Chrono compositions may be a strong composition with like a Blademaster attached to it, because people are less likely to run infiltrators because they're going to want to be running things with like Jhin, or maybe they are keen to the situation. They're running Blaster Brawlers, long range attacks. You don't have to be scared about your KO getting one shot. So I think there's a lot of situations where you can run Blaster Brawlers. Snipers are obviously going to be good. Darkstar is going to be good. There might be a small window where you can run Sorcs some games because people aren't going to be contesting you for mechs. So I think Sorcs are going to be great. No. But there's a small window where you can do that. You can start running Static Shiv for Chrono and like early win streak, get a lot of money. There might be a world in which you run a Celestial Kassadin with another Mana Reaver early game composition that you get a 3-star Kassadin because he's uncontested. There could be a world in which you get that where he's constantly just proccing Mana Reaver. I actually don't know if Runan's procs Mana Reaver, but I would have to imagine it triggers on hit effects. So there could be a world where you have like an RFC and then you build like RFC, Sojin, Runance on Kassadin, and he's just constantly mana reavering people and then disarming them. I could see a world in which that's a meta. So that is all really interesting. I think this patch is very cool because I think a lot of things may be played, and a lot of the old compositions that were strong are still going to be very strong, and that's probably going to be a very good way to get ELO. That's what I'm going to be looking at, is running some of the older compositions like Blaster Brawlers, Cybernetics, stuff like that, and gaining some ELO that way from everybody trying to contest for snipers and stuff like that. I personally, when I play the game, I like playing the game running uncontested comps. I have a lot more fun running uncontested comps rather than just playing the lottery with everybody else. So anyways, that's gonna be it for the video, guys. Thank you so much for coming by and watching. Hope you guys learned a lot. And if you want to watch me play the game, want to watch me talk more about the game, I always stream on Twitch at twitch.tv/DuncanMass, and I'll leave that in the link description below. It's also linked all over my YouTube channel and stuff like that. So if you're interested in watching that type of stuff and you want to see me talk more about the game, and you like how I look at the game and stuff like that, then stop by there. Anyways, that's gonna be it, guys. Bye.